When I first became HIV positive, I was instantly a member of a community that was like really foreign to me. I was just like, what the hell's going on? One thing I noticed though during the early years is that the people that immersed themselves into the fact that they had HIV and everything that they did in their life was all based around HIV, those people, it seemed to me, were dying really quickly. And I decided not to make HIV my life. I just wanted to live life normally and just try and, be an artist, try and survive. So I didn't become a member of any organizations. I didn't go to any support. Well, actually, no, I did go to a support group once when I was kind of having problems, but it was so uncomfortable because I could hear whispers around the room going, that's Joe Average. That's Joe Average. So it became quite uncomfortable to me being in like a sort of a support group where all of a sudden you're the focus. I didn't want to have HIV define who I was, externally or internally. I just wanted to survive and live and just figure out how to be me instead of how to be me with HIV, just how to be just me. Because I hadn't done a very good job of it in my life. I was just sort of like partying through life and suffered from depression and low self-esteem and stuff. So it gave me an opportunity to just work on me. And like I said, that cartoon anvil hit me on the head really hard and left me with a lot of things to think about.
I had a small group of friends. My life was more in my career than it was anywhere else. I had a small group of friends, and with the exception of one other one, they've all gone. There was about six or eight people. I had a very close friend from Toronto who would spend 6 months of every year staying at my place. I had a big enough apartment, lots of room, 2 guys, easy. We were very close. And I remember him saying to me that he was going back to Toronto one time. He said, and I'm never coming back. And that was the last time I saw him. Now one can only wonder what that does to people. They're only now starting to look at something that they've identified as, or that they've named, the AIDS generation. The AIDS generation is essentially defined as people who were of age in 1980 and still alive in 2013, 2014. So they've lived through it. They didn't necessarily have HIV, but they were in contact with it. And as one of the fellows in my current discussion group said, here was the 6-second soundbite. He said, I look around and I don't see many me's. And I thought, boy, you sure said a mouthful. The cohort of men is about 20% smaller than it should be. And they also tend to be poorer. They're on some sort of assistance. Because they lived through a period of time in which their years of highest earning took place simultaneously to a time when they were either sick or they had friends and family members who were dying. And that wasn't conducive to going off to work at an intense occupation and make money and save money. So today, they did what they could in order to get through, and today there is a disproportionately high percentage, I don't know what the percentage is, but it is higher, of guys who are on one form of assistance or another. There is something that happened to a generation. It got confronted with a disease, and it realized that it was only going to be resolved if it became politically active. Some were extreme, some were diplomatic, but all were politically activist. We've come a long way in fighting that activism. But just because we finished, so-called, and have achieved many of the dreams that we never thought we'd ever get to, we don't just go and retire on a beach. The legacy is not just me, or it's not just mine. I think the legacy that is being discovered is that the people who went through that process in Vancouver and everywhere, in Canada certainly, if not in the United States as well, continue being activists and continue looking for new places where the intelligence and the skills that we have learned can still be applied. That's the legacy. And there are lots of us, I think, to do it. We just have to realize we're getting older.
Then I found myself in a 15-year period where I was I guess I was kind of lost and didn't have a purpose in life anymore, and was also, in large part because of that, was involved in heavy substance use of crystal meth. I'm reluctant to call myself addicted because, for two reasons. One is I don't believe I need to repeat I'm a meth addict for the rest of my life, because that period's over. I don't think I need to remind myself of that period happened, because I can remember it quite well enough. And because once I figured out that I had purpose again in life, quitting crystal meth was instant. When I turned around, when I was approaching 50, I realized that they lied. I wasn't dead 2 years after diagnosis. I was in fact still alive. So that was kind of a revelation of, oh, okay, what am I doing then? It wasn't enough of a realization, though, to really make me change, because I was missing a significant piece of what that meant to still be alive after 50. And that was what my HIV diagnosis stole from me was my future. Whereas going to architecture school was a goal I set for myself when I was 8 years old, I had stopped setting goals for myself after diagnosis because I was told I wasn't going to live. So even though I didn't stop my life and sit down and wait to die like a fair number of people did in that era, they gave up on life, they checked out, and were dead in a short period. I said, no, I'm going to continue on until the illness makes me stop. I'm going to just continue on and live my life. But then I finished architecture school, and it was kind of like, oh, now what? Which led me to be open to the opportunity of volunteering for the society. And then once that was over, there really was no purpose left. So it wasn't until about 4 years ago, so about a year before I quit crystal, that I figured out, because the diagnosis had stolen my sense of having a future, I had stopped setting goals for myself. If you don't have a goal to work towards, you have no direction you have no idea of which direction to move towards to get that goal or anything. So you're kind of floundering. And I mean, it's all good and well to be living in the moment and being present in the moment, but if you don't have any dreams or desires or any sense of where you want to be and where you want to go, you just kind of get lost, and that's where I was until I figured that out.
I'd say the big difference is that there is more help out there. So positive living is a great help for me. However, I see as less funds coming in than were before. And people are not as concerned about it, that they're donating to it. There's not as much in the media about it. And if there is a big conference going on, like an AIDS conference in Toronto, I couldn't believe how little play there was on the media.
I think people nowadays don't think HIV is a killer. Back in the day when I was on the street, everyone thought it was a killer. And I don't think people killed themselves for the reasons that they killed themselves. They parted themselves out of the picture and basically did themselves out. Because a lot of doctors back then would basically say you have a year to 2 years to live, maybe a bit more. But Carposies were taking over at one time, and people have Carposies. Imagine having black and blue marks all over your body and feeling like someone's itching you from inside. It must be freaky. I never had them. But I know people who have had them, and they were just totally freaked out by them. Today on the street, I don't see as many hookers as I used to back then. But I don't think people nowadays think of HIV as a death penalty. It's more a manageable disease. And so they continue partying in a way and doing their thing in a way and not thinking of maybe changing. But I think everyone changes as they get older and they change different routes. I used to party and have fun when I was young on the streets, and then as I got older and had to accept more responsibility, I did. Everyone has their own timing for it. There's no true route of saying, you got to do it now, because it doesn't always happen like that. You have to be compassionate enough to say, I'll help you out on your time. If you try to do it on your time, on my time, it would be like trying to force someone to do something they're not prepared to do yet. When you do it on their time, they'll make the time when they're prepared to change.
I think that there are many unsung heroes that never get any real recognition for all the work they put in, and I don't think they do it for that. I didn't do it for that. And I don't think that many of the people that I have served with really ever did this for public recognition. They did it because it was the right thing to do, and they wanted to leave a legacy, and do the right thing, and be part of our communities. And what's going to save us down the road is being actively involved in our communities. We've gained huge amounts of ground over these last few years. Same-sex marriage, huge, huge, huge. And I don't think that that would have happened unless we had had the activism and the push, because what we were confronted with was we had no power with our partners. And I think enough of our friends out there, the outings that happened with HIV and AIDS in the early days started the grounds for that, because all of a sudden people realized that is my brother, that is my sister, that is my aunt, that is my mother, that is my father, that were dying of this disease. And all of a sudden we had a face.
We all believed quite sincerely that we were staring death in the face, and that meant that human relationships, particularly with someone who was, I used to say, I wish we'd recognize we're all in the same lifeboat and start pulling in the same direction, but there was a certain bonding, very special, and too many of them passed away and are gone now, but I still treasure some of the relationships I formed then. Very, very special. Some of the finest relationships in my life, and I'm not talking about sexual or that kind of intimacy, but an emotional intimacy that is still hard to find in this world. It wasn't at that time. We want to carry on. And the struggle today is to convince people that the problem has not gone away, that there is still no cure, that it's a bit of an exaggeration, in my opinion, that you know, it's a manageable disease. It may be if you have access to the medications that are available and are quite effective. I'm still here. But that's not good enough. There are too many people who don't have access to those life-saving medications. That should be part of our struggle too, both nationally and internationally, because there are places on this planet where it is still a desperate daily struggle of survival, living with AIDS. So we need to expand our view, expand our vision, I think.